So Trump won the election. That pissed a lot of people off and it made a lot of people happy. What I've done since he got elected was use the internet, use ChatGPT, and got an unbiased thought process on what 2025 is going to look like from an economic standpoint and from a real estate investing standpoint because Trump got elected. I'm not taking a political side here. There are some pros and some cons to what Trump says he's going to do in 2025. So let's break it down from an overall economic standpoint, and then let's get into a real estate investing standpoint and talk about what's probably going to happen and what things are going to look like next year. One of the biggest things Trump has talked about is tax reform, mainly leaning around tax cuts. He's talking about extending his Tax Cut and Job Acts from 2017, which would continue to lower individual tax rates and increase tax exemptions. This could mean more disposable income for individuals, which could spur the economy, because if people have money to spend, they tend to spend it. He's also talked about reducing corporate tax rates. Right now, it's sitting at around 21%. He's talked about bringing it from anywhere from 15% to 20%. So a slight decrease of corporate taxes or a pretty substantial one, depending on how deep he goes. This would probably spur the economy. As a small business owner, if I spend less money in taxes, I usually will go ahead and return by spending that money on employees or spending that money on marketing or spending that money on something to increase my business. He's also talked about eliminating taxes on overtime and on tips. If you work at a job where you get tips, you wouldn't get taxed on the tips. And also if we work overtime, you wouldn't get taxed on that overtime. Now that obviously is going to put more money in the pockets of people in those industries. So that is a good thing for them and the economy. Now that's the half glass full side. Let's look at the half glass empty side. Then we'll get into tariffs and also some immigration things before we move on to real estate. Penn Wharton budget model has stated that if this were to go through, they estimate that it would add about $5.8 trillion to the national deficit over the next 10 years. Now, of course, he's not going to be president for 10 years, so that is not an accurate number. Somebody else will come in and be president, whether it's Republican or Democrat, and add different tax incentives and pull away different tax cuts. So it's not actually going to happen. But the point is, taking money away from taxes is pulling money away from the government and giving it to citizens. It helps citizens, but doesn't necessarily help the government's bottom line. So there are some pros and some cons to this. It's not all good news. Trump has also talked quite a bit about tariffs and increasing tariffs by up to 60%, especially for Chinese imports.
Did you just float out the idea of getting rid of income taxes and replacing it with tariffs?
Well, okay.
Were you serious about that?
Yeah, sure. But why not? Because ready? Our country was the richest relatively in the 1880s and 1890s. A president who was assassinated named McKinley. He was the tariff king. He spoke beautifully of tariffs. His language was really beautiful. We will not allow the enemy to come in and take our jobs and take our factories and take our workers and take our families unless they pay a big price. And the big price is tariffs.
Now, that sounds good on the surface. By charging other countries more to bring goods in the United States, the government gets more of that money on tariffs and then will hopefully put that money to good use. Maybe. The downside is those costs can and probably will be, at least in part, pushed onto the consumer. Meaning if China is importing some goods that cost $100 million, now they cost $160 million, that cost is going to go into that good, and that good will cost more, meaning you and I will pay more for that Chinese good. Now, it's not an exact one-to-one scenario, but the general point is it costs more money for them to ship it over, so it's going to cost us more money to buy it. Now, the side of this that Trump is betting on is we will start to produce more of those goods here in the U.S., and it will cost us less money now that it costs so much more to import that good, and it will drive more business and more manufacturing here in the United States. Now, when he did this last time, it did help, and the Biden administration actually kept a lot of those tariffs in place because they did a good job at bringing more of that manufacturing, more of that business to the United States, making us more dependent on ourselves to produce the goods we need, but it didn't do exactly what he wanted, but he's talking about doing even more of that, so we'll see where that shakes out. It's one of those things that could be a little bit of like kind of pulling off a Band-Aid. Things maybe cost more at first, but when we start to build the infrastructure to build those goods in the U.S., it could cost less and bring work and manufacturing back to the U.S. Trump has famously said he's going to do the biggest mass deportation in U.S. history by shoring up the border and sending people that came across the border illegally back to their home origin country. Now, that sounds like a really, really big job, and obviously not everybody is going to get deported. They came over illegally, and the whole border is not going to be fully secured up. Overall, there's not a ton of drawbacks to shoring up the border. The biggest one could potentially be some shortages of labor in some of the construction, agricultural industries that a lot of the illegal immigrants get into. He has also talked about increasing the drilling, coal, and oil industry, so that would increase some of the jobs in those industries by cutting some of the regulations. So it's kind of one of those things that potentially losing some jobs here, but maybe gaining some jobs here. Who knows exactly what will come to pass, but that's just what he's talked about. All right, enough of that boring stuff. Let's get into the real estate investing side and how what he's saying he will do and maybe potentially do will affect the real estate industry in total. If he increases the cost of labor and increases tariffs, that will cause materials and labor to go up. And guess what's used in construction and rehabbing? Materials and labor. So it could potentially add some inflationary constraints by increasing the cost of rehabbing real estate and building from scratch. This could make projects take longer and make them more expensive, which nobody wants to pay even more than they are right now for new homes or rehabbed homes. Which, if he does increase inflation and his policies do increase inflation, the Fed will not be lowering interest rates as rapidly as they said they would. The Fed is only going to continue to lower interest rates if inflation is under control. If what Trump is talking about doing actually comes to pass and the negative side of inflation comes to pass, then they will not lower interest rate. So the cost of money for me and other real estate investors will remain high, which has a negative impact on how much I can buy and how much I cash flow from what I can buy. A lot of the tax benefits that Trump has talked about do affect the real estate industry as well, so that would be a good thing. He has enacted things like accelerated depreciation, which allows you to write off an asset or a business expense fully in that 1 year, which is a huge benefit to not paying as much taxes. Overall, like anything else, there are some pros and cons of what Trump is talking about doing. Same as if Harris had got elected, there would be some pros and cons of what she would do. You just have to understand what's happening, and you have to understand how to take advantage of what's happening. The worst case scenario would be for you to put your head in the sand and not understand what's going on and not be able to take advantage of what's going on. Especially if you're looking at real estate investing, there are always paths to weave and things to do to take advantage of tax savings or any other types of incentives that come across our plate. So make sure you're following me here so that you can keep up to date on what's happening so you take advantage of it and make 2025 your best year ever. If you're interested in learning how to invest in real estate with little to none of your own money, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Check out the description for a free training and also a free trial to my brand new software system that allows you to use AI to find discounted properties. It educates you and gives you weekly training and coaching from my coaches, and also gives you connections to resources like 100% funding options and things along those lines. So you get those three things for being a part of my Deal Pilot software. A free 7-day trial is in the description as well. So get that trial, check out that free training, and I will see you on the next one.